Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to try and summarize the first two chapters that I've read of Zizek's book of interviews, Across the Real, that was published in French in 2008. I realize my videos are long and many people don't have all that much time, so they don't even know whether it's worthwhile listening to these videos or not. Uh, so I'm going to give a summary that is more a sort of skeleton table of contents. I think this is the best set of interviews that Zizek has ever given. And as I translate, although I comment as well, but I translate the text line by line, sentence by sentence in my videos. I think that makes them worth listening to if you're interested in the themes. So here I'm going to be giving you the themes with as little commentary as possible, and I'm going to try and do it in 5 minutes. So we can't count this little introduction. So ready, go. Chapter 1 is called The Couch of the Philosophers, and we're going to see a movement in the chapter from the couch, or the psychoanalytic cure, to the philosophers, psychoanalysis as political analysis, ideology critique. So there are 3 sections in chapter 1: of analysis, then Freud and Jung, then the sense of analysis. So 1, of analysis. Zizek talks about his own analysis. He distinguishes 3 phases in any analysis, including his own: crisis, resistance, and then resistance to change, and then change. In his case, the crisis was he wanted to commit suicide. That was cured in 3 months. He continued, but he resisted, and the form of resistance was talking too much. And the change was when he managed to stop talking too much, and yet to accept the symptom. So accept that he was always going to talk too much. And my commentary there is accept that he was not going to be a psychoanalyst, because a psychoanalyst must shut up, but he was going to be a philosopher. He generalizes this 3-stage model: crisis, resistance, change, to the social and political level, and draws the conclusion that the beginning of all change is to stop false activity. Number 2, Freud, Jung. In this part, he distinguishes 2 approaches, which he calls Freudian and Jungian. Or we don't have to believe that he's actually talking about the real Freud and the real Jung, because he says we have to watch out and not make Freud a Jungian, as some people do. So the 2 approaches are openness to contingency, or a closed system which has a set of keys to the unconscious, a set of translations from one symbol to a content in the unconscious. So I'm going to say that the Freudian way is kenosis. Kenosis is when Jesus became man and emptied himself of the attributes of divinity, including omniscience. So kenosis, being open and not knowing. And gnosis is what he calls the Jungian way, which is knowing what the dictionary is. So this leads to a consideration of the two traps for psychoanalysis that must be avoided. First trap is the empiricist or positivist or reductionist trap, summed up in trying to find the right drug or the right neuralink to cure psychic illness. And the second trap is the neo-spiritualist thought that Zizek associates with Jung, but also with the New Age and Western Buddhism. So we need a third element, and the third element is avoiding the empiricist trap is the concrete. The spiritualist trap is the abstract universal. So the third term is to reinvent the universal from concrete analysis. So it's the concrete universal. 3, the sense of psychoanalysis. In that the most interesting thing is that Zizek calls for a pact between Deleuzians and Lacanians around the concept of the real. He distinguishes different senses of the real. He's going to take up this in chapter 2. The these are traps as well. The substantial idea of reality behind our theories, the more refined theory-laden idea of the real as always caught up in the symbolic and masked by it. And the third is the third term is to say the real is not behind the mask, it is the mask itself. So that is going to require development. His conclusion, in a more general sense, I've already exceeded 5 minutes, so maybe it'll be 10. He is that psychoanalysis, more than a cure, is a thought, and I can summarize that in reference to Heidegger's thought, spiritualist thought, only a God can save us. Here, Zizek is telling us, in effect, only thinking can save us. And insofar as we're not thinking psychoanalytically and dialectically, we're not thinking yet. So chapter 2 is called The Object Lacan. So his conclusion to chapter 1 was it's not just a patient, but everything in the culture is to be analyzed. And so he's going to analyze the object Lacan. In chapter 2, we have 3 parts. Master Jacques, readings of Lacan, and one that I'm not going to consider here, feminine, masculine, because I haven't done the corresponding video. The main thing here is Zizek distinguishes 3 senses of the real: the imaginary real, the symbolic real, and the real real. So the imaginary real is the monstrous, the abyss, the thing. The symbolic real is the real as captured in a meaningless formalism. A good example is quantum mechanics, or the late Lacan's topological schemas. And the third real is that which is not behind reality, but is a surface, a pure surface, which is at the same time a distortion. So we're not distorting the real. The real is in the symbolic as a distortion. So that's the stain, something that escapes our symbolism, but our symbolic, but at the same time sticks to us, that can't be gotten rid of. The next part about the readings of Lacan is mainly about how he agrees with Jacques-Alain Miller's reading of Lacan, that is essentially his own. But there are three differences between Zizek and Lacan, according to Zizek. One is the readings that they have of Hegel. Lacan has a lacunary Hegel, because he barely read Hegel and didn't really understand him, according to Zizek. Lacan ended up being conformist and liberal. And thirdly, the problem of the return to ordinary reality after the encounter with the real in analysis leads to advocating a position of wise disengagement, whereas Zizek advocates engagement and fidelity. So that runs on to three different aims for analysis. The first Lacan aimed for complete civilization. That's impossible. The second Lacan, in Zizek's reading, aimed for traversing the phantasm to get to the blinding encounter with the real. That's still too substantialist, according to Zizek. And the third aim of analysis is to accommodate oneself to the symptoms, to change one's relation to the symptoms, that I suggest may be called befriending the symptoms. So in Zizek's case, he talked too much. That was a resistance, but it was also a symptom of his whole personality. And the aim of analysis then, or the end, was to befriend the symptom, and in Zizek's case, become a philosopher. Readings of Lacan, I've already touched on this. Zizek accepts Jacques-Alain Miller's reading of Lacan. He examines Lacan's reading of Heidegger and notes that Lacan was very influenced by Heidegger and his critique of modernity, but nonetheless insisted on the subject all through his career. So the subject, the empty subject, the Cartesian subject, and there he came up against, Zizek claims that, or affirms or shows that Lacan came up against the question of the coincidence of opposites in the real, and he takes that from the different formulations that Lacan has of the Cartesian cogito ergo sum. The first formulation in Lacan's work, Zizek finds it's on the inner life, and of the cogito by Lacan was the opposite, and reduced everything to the symbolic. And the third reading that begins in the logic of the phantasm, logic of fantasy, is an identity between the cogito thought and the real, but an empty identity. So thought is void, and the subject is void, and the real is void. That's what I called kenosis. So we have irrationalism, formalism, and then kenosis. So the three statuses of the coincidence of opposites is the imaginary, I am another. That's a contradiction. The second is, so these are all valid, but we're going further in each stage. Imaginary, the coincidence of opposites, the symbolic phase of l'accord with the quilting point, and that the master signifier falls into the signified, and the most radical coincidence of opposites is effectuated according to the real, and that's the real that always escapes, but always sticks to us and can't be gotten rid of. Okay, so that's here on the counter. That's 15 minutes and 45 seconds. So overall, I've done 60 minutes to give you just an idea of the topics covered in the first two chapters of this very interesting book of interviews with Zizek.